Hi, thank you so much for joining us for CFP Board's Business Update webinar. My name is Lynn Ballou, and I'll be your hostess today. For those of you who may not know me, I am currently enjoying serving in my new role as the San Francisco Bay Area Ambassador for the CFP Board of Standards. And in that job that I really love, I'm really enjoying advocating consumer protections and highly ethical financial planning. These are really top on my list of priorities. I'm also known as managing partner of Ballou Plum Wealth Advisors. We're located in Northern California. And throughout my 30-year career, I, like you, have educated clients on all aspects of the financial planning process and help clients focus on meeting their unique goals and personal challenges. So hopefully I'll be very helpful to you today and to all of our panel in making sure that all CFPs get what we all need from this type of a call. We have so much interesting material to cover today. You're going to be amazed at the depth of knowledge that you're going to have imparted to you. We're actually broadcasting live from San Diego, California. The CFP Board of Directors just actually finished up its first in-person meeting of the year just before the webinar today. So during today's webinar, we're actually going to be hearing about CFP Board's activities and plans for 2011, including updates on the public policy advocacy of CFP Board and the Financial Planning Coalition. We'll also be covering recent developments in CFP Board's consumer outreach initiatives. And we will be getting the latest updates on CFP Board's work to launch the first large-scale national public awareness campaign to increase awareness of the CFP certification. And that's something that I think is going to be very exciting to learn more about. So many of you have been kind enough to already have submitted questions, and we will certainly try to get to all of those during today's program if we can. Furthermore, during the webinar itself, you are invited to use the question and answer function on your screen to ask questions of our panelists. You may submit your question at any time during the program, and we'll certainly try to address as many questions as possible during a Q&A session at the end of the program. And by the way, if for some reason we cannot get to all of the questions today during the broadcast, no worries, because the CFP Board will actually work hard after this webinar to provide answers to you directly. So without further ado, let's get started. And joining us today, we have the 2011 Chair of CFP Board's Board of Directors, the wonderful Mr. Chuck Moran. Welcome, Chuck.
That's the nicest thing I've ever heard.
And then across the table from me and to his right, we have the 2011 Chair-elect of CFP Board's Board of Directors, the also wonderful Alan Goldfarb. Welcome, Alan.
Thank you for having me here.
Oh, it's great that you've made the time. And then, of course, many of you have had the opportunity, as have I, to get to know Kevin Keller, CFP Board CEO. We're very, very lucky to have him with us today as well, and he's doing an amazing job for us. So welcome to all of our guests.
Thank you, Lynn.
So earlier today, the Board of Directors wrapped up its first in-person meeting, as we were saying, of 2011. So what did this meeting focus on? What specific issues did you all discuss?
Well, typically we have a broad range of topics to discuss at every meeting, and this meeting was certainly no different in that respect. It was my first chairing it, and it only took me 10 minutes more than the agenda to get out to the end of it. We had good discussions on the latest with respect to CFP Board's public advocacy efforts, consumer outreach initiatives, and the development of the public awareness campaign, which is moving rapidly toward launch. We also continued our ongoing strategic planning work, looking at where we want CFP Board to be in the coming years. Over the past few years, we've shared with stakeholders the house. It looks a little bit like a Greek temple, as you see it in the image there, that illustrates how our core objectives support CFP Board's mission. We have 6 key areas with specific objectives that have guided CFP Board work to further our mission. This house was designed to help us plan our work for a 3-year period from 2008 through 2010, and we've accomplished much of the things that we've set out in each of these areas. During the past year or so, though, we've taken a look at our activities in each of these areas, reviewed them in the context of current events and trends, and in light of where we want the organization to be in the years ahead. We've paid special attention to how the core objectives work together and explored ways the objectives can be stated more clearly. We've identified some areas of overlap where objectives could be effectively combined and areas where the objectives could be restated more clearly. At our Board of Directors meeting this week, we adopted a new house to guide us over the next several years.
Yeah, and with that new house, we improved it and changed it to some degree, as you can see. Sustainability remains the important pillar, but some of the others have been modified. The new competency pillar now covers both credentialing and education. The old enforcement pillar now highlights professional standards and the enforcement activities that we need to uphold. As you know, with all the advocacy been going on, we've expanded our advocacy pillar to becoming public policy to better reflect the work that the CFP Board has engaged in on behalf of the public and in support of our mission to benefit the public. Communications, as the last example, is now communications and outreach, focusing on awareness and preference for CFP certification as the standard for financial planning. You'll also note that there has been a slight change in the mission statement with the addition of the phrase competent and ethical. The CFP certification standards define competent and ethical financial planning, and we felt it important to highlight that in the mission statement.
You know, Chuck and Al, I really want to thank you for the work that you do and the predecessors that went before as we designed the house, because it really allows me, serving as CEO, to align the financial and staff resources of the organization in a way that can be responsive to the mission as we've defined it here, and then the key objectives and the outcomes that are a part of the house. I also want to point out that the consolidation of examination and credentialing, or rather education and credentialing, into the singular competency pillar doesn't mean that we're placing any less emphasis on either examination or education. In fact, over the next few years, you'll see even more activity with our education and examination standards. Last year, we adopted a new exam blueprint based on the results of the 2009 job analysis study. The new blueprint is task-based, and it is requiring more work than simply changing how we code the individual questions. In the past, you're all familiar with the 89 topics. There will still be a topic outline, but the focus is moving more to a task-based outline, and it's requiring our Council on Examinations to do additional work. In fact, we've appointed two new groups, an item writing working group and a technical advisory working group. These groups will assist us at CFP Board with both item writing and also looking at best practices for CFP Board as we seek to remain relevant and seek to adopt the practices of high-stakes examinations and the established professions. We'll also begin a comprehensive assessment as we look at the computer-based testing. It's a major potential initiative and one that's well into the future, but that's some of what we're working on there.
Wow, that's really amazing news. So I understand that the new task-based focus of the exam blueprint is actually designed to reinforce that the exam is meant to ensure future CFP professionals demonstrate the ability to apply and integrate financial planning knowledge to real-life situations. And I have to tell you, as someone who has an established practice and who looks to hire that next generation, that's really good news to me, because we really want those new people coming in to have had that experience and that training. So tell us a little bit about what work is being done at the education level to actually help future CFP professionals gain that knowledge and really develop those skills.
Well, Lynn, those skills are, as you say, very important, especially the ability to integrate what you've learned in the knowledge portion to put it to practical work. In order to succeed as a planner, obviously you need to be able to integrate it, and the new plan is to develop a capstone class in addition to the normal classes that will force the students to develop a plan and actually participate in some form of planning engagement. The new exam blueprint that focuses on the ability to apply and integrate financial planning knowledge for real-life situations. I mean, there's been discussion of groups where students might actually help the public in terms of practice, in terms of pre-internship type activities.
That could be very valuable.
The key is the real-life situations and the ability to integrate this together with everything they're doing. A number of institutions have already established such a capstone class. The course is now going to be required in registration prior to December of 2011. And going forward, hopefully it'll be a unique opportunity for people to actually learn and practice.
Are you going to be reaching out then to those of us who have practices to find out if we're interested in setting up those types of in-house internships to help in that, or have you guys thought about that at all?
You know, Lynn, we're really relying on the educational providers to lead the charge on it. The other thing I want to be clear about is the Capstone course is required for those students who start their program on or after January 1, 2012.
Okay.
So if a student were to enter the program now, they would not have that requirement. They could certainly take it, and we would encourage them to, but it will be a requirement for students matriculating essentially January 1, 2012.
You know what may also happen as a result of this, I think this is really exciting, is, you know, we who are in the field every day working in this profession worry that we might be a one-generation profession. And unlike the law firm model and the accountant model, you know, we haven't been around for generations and generations. There's not that sort of set, okay, you come in as an intern and you do that during your summer, and then you get hired in as a junior guy who works 90 hours a day, and et cetera, et cetera. So might this be the beginning of something like that?
That's exactly the purpose behind this.
Great.
To instigate more of an apprenticeship approach, way of learning the business under the tutelage of a certificate, where you can enhance your abilities and therefore be more worthwhile to your first and possibly future employers.
That's very exciting. Thanks, Alan. You want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, we're not only doing that, also the ethical standards are critical. As you know what's going on with Dodd-Frank and those other activities coming out of Washington, that the Professional Standards Department has been working with volunteers from the DEC, which for those who aren't aware of it is the Disciplinary and Ethics Commission, as well as a Business Model Working Group, to review and update the number of key documents related to our enforcement activities. As you know, enforcement is probably the fifth E to what we do, and one of the things that sets us apart from a lot of the other organizations that are out there. Last December, for example, we released an updated version of our answers to frequently asked questions about our standards of professional conduct. We've reviewed the ethics declaration on the new renewing CFP professionals indicate that they've been involved in certain types of conduct. In the past, we found that the three questions that were there were somehow confusing, and the answers we were getting didn't necessarily jive with what the actual situation was. So they've created a new set of questions and definitions that will be on the future applications.
Good.
We're reviewing professionals, and they'll be using these questions as we release the new application in a couple of weeks. In addition, we're committed to ensuring that professionals have a strong understanding of their ethical standards so they can apply them to their practices, regardless of where their practices are. And as such, we'll be hosting webinars in the future to help achieve that goal. In fact, the first one is coming later this month on March 31st, where we'll focus exclusively on issues professionals can address to avoid CFP Board rule violations.
I have to thank you for these webinars. It's really a great way to have a communication with the board and to have the board have a communication with us to make sure we're on the same page. And I really love the notion that you post it to the CFP website for us who can't always break for lunch and listen in to participate and also to take questions in advance. So just from the trenches, keep up that if you don't mind. It's great. I know it's expensive and it's a lot of hard work on your part, but I think it really makes a difference. I also know that the board and the organization have been working diligently during the past few years on really establishing CFP Board as a very respected voice in public policy circles. So the CFP Board's work, for example, with FPA and NAPA as the Financial Planning Coalition has even contributed to the success of provisions within the Dodd-Frank legislation that, of course, affects financial planners. So in January, the coalition sent CFP professionals updates about GAO and SEC studies that were completed on the topics of the regulation of financial planning and on extending a fiduciary standard to broker-dealers who provide investment advice. So now that those studies on those issues have been completed, Chuck, can you tell us what has CFP Board been doing in the public policy arena?
I'm excited to do that, but before I do, I want to pick up on something you said a minute ago, Lynn, and that is these webinars. The only frustration about doing these webinars is that we don't reach every certificant. So if there's anybody out there, the next time we have a webinar, bring a friend or remind them that these webinars are posted and they might have an opportunity to listen to them at their own convenience.
That's a great idea. Maybe they can do a lunch bunch study group webinar together or something like that.
No reason why you can't have fun. Since our last business update webinar in November, we've had time to take a very close look at the studies that have come out in January and at the new political landscape following last year's general election, so that there are some of the people that we were dealing with who are no longer there to deal with, and we've got some new people in very important positions. The Dodd-Frank legislation left many details to be decided, and the new Congress in some ways has a very different perspective on legislation. I might mention that now that Dodd is head of the Motion Picture Association lobby, maybe there's a different relationship there, but Washington moves in a serious way.
Maybe we'll get some of like those wartime films that they used to do or something about.
We could have a CFP fiduciary film coming out here.
Frank Capra again, right?
I like it.
That's beautiful.
On a more serious note, though, we've been focused on the three studies that were mandated in the Dodd-Frank legislation that impact the financial planning profession. The first one I want to talk about is the GAO study on the regulation and oversight of financial planning that identified some key questions related to consumer protection. And there are many issues within the study that provide the opportunity to follow up and do some more research on these things. So there's a door open there for some of the issues that we continue to think are important for Congress and the regulators.
That's a good point.
The second one is the SEC study on investment advisor examinations that address the question of what entity should have oversight over registered investment advisors. The study outlined three options for further considerations, and I might note that the study was a staff study, not a pronouncement from the SEC. The three options were first to grant FINRA oversight of duly registered broker-dealers and investment advisors, and as from what I can tell, FINRA is willing to accept that honor if bestowed upon them. Number two is to establish a new SRO for investment advisors, and the third was to keep the oversight with the Securities and Exchange Commission. The coalition has expressed support for keeping oversight of investment advisors with the Securities and Exchange Commission. The third study, again coming out of the SEC, also completed a study on extending the fiduciary standard to broker-dealers that are providing investment advice, concluding that the fiduciary standard currently applicable to investment advisors should be extended to broker-dealers who provide investment advice. Again, this is the staff, and it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out with the Commission. But it's moving in a direction that is at least positive for the moment.
Such a change without notice.
We're going to help moving it in the right direction. We're working on it.
Even better.
CFP Board and the Coalition have advocated for this conclusion from the very start. We're going to continue to encourage the SEC to move forward with rulemaking on this issue, and we certainly will provide a resource and look for partners and people that agree that this is worth moving forward. In the time between the adoption of the Dodd-Frank legislation and the release of these studies, certainly the political landscape morphed a good deal. Regardless of what happens, we remain dedicated to moving forward with our work advising legislators and regulators on how to best protect consumers by ensuring that financial planning services are delivered with fiduciary accountability and transparency. And I'd like to add one thing to that. the more that we do in this area and the more people that we talk to, the less we need to introduce financial planning. Increasingly, they are aware of it. They have a family member themselves who are curious about pursuing it, and occasionally there's that whisper, can you refer us to somebody who might be able to help us with our financial planning? And that obviously we have the answer. We have lots of certificates.
So would you say your feeling is that there's fairly positive feeling toward the industry then?
Well, the first thing is that they are aware.
Okay.
That's good. And I would say certainly a lot of it is positive, but maybe even the better thing is that there rarely is something that is negative.
Oh, that's good.
There's one important issue, Lynn, that I think is important for the folks listening is that, clearly the focus last year was on Dodd-Frank and the adoption of it. And many people think, wow, it's over. Whatever your feelings are about Washington, it really has only just begun. I mean, much of the work that was set in place here now is moving from the legislative or the congressional side to the executive branch and what has to be done at the SEC. So this is just the first leg of what will be a very long marathon when we talk about the work that came out of Dodd-Frank.
That's good.
Yeah, our job is definitely not over. And the fact is that we're doing a lot more than just Dodd-Frank. I mean, we've been engaged in a number of activities that weren't directly related to Dodd-Frank. In the last few months, for example, we contacted the GAO as well as the Department of Labor to address very specific issues concerning things like income throughout retirement. It's a very significant issue today with the amount of people 65 and older retiring and how longer we live.
Yep.
Other issues talking about target date funds, where they're structured where people may not get what they're expecting to get. And more importantly, the definition of fiduciary under ERISA. I mean, fiduciary has been tossed around so much. It's a question of how are we defining and how are other people defining and how does it affect our certificates.
Helen, if I could, I think that goes back to the previous discussion here. ERISA was passed in 1974, and here we are these many years later working on the definition of fiduciary. So the idea that Dodd-Frank is an end of something as opposed to a beginning of something that may never end is a perspective. And certainly as we move forward, the regulatory group becomes more and more important here.
You might almost say it's a new beginning.
Yes.
Well, in this post-Bernie Madoff era, this is top on people's minds. And as you pointed out, we have the largest demographic in the history of the world ready to retire in this country. And they are a very nervous group. And so having
advisors, as you say, are gearing up their practice not to the accumulation of capital, but the distribution and preservation of capital.
Right. When I go to conferences that are put on in our industry, you see new conference breakout sessions like the new retiramentality and things of that nature. So it is top on everybody's mind because no one wants to, as a CFP advisor, tell their client who's 80, gee, guess what? That Kmart, Walmart job is waiting for you, and you need to get out and go do it.
Yeah, and if the listeners are interested in learning more about it, we have something on our website.
What do you have?
The issues are spelled out as well as any copies of the comment letters that we've been getting and giving out. The website is www.cfp.net/advocacy.
Okay, that's good to know, too.
I'm really pleased with what CFP Board has contributed to the profession's engagement with public policy and advocacy. And I'm also pleased with the work that we've accomplished with the Financial Planning Association and NAPFA. 4 years ago, the Board of Directors made a decision to move from Denver to Washington, largely to play a more engaged role with public policy and advocacy. And so I think we've made great progress. As Alan and Chuck were saying earlier, I think that policymakers are seeing us as pro-consumer advocates, and I just think that we're in a much better place than we were even 4 years ago.
Well, that's really good to hear. Maybe what we'll start seeing now is instead of these breakout sessions about how to work with top athletes, how to work as a financial advisor for politicians. It'll be a new specialization in our field. So given the status of the Dodd-Frank issues, it sounds like there will be more opportunities for CFP professionals to actually be taking action during the coming year. So, maybe you could tell us a little bit what updates you have on your plate for CFP Board initiatives to reach consumers with that understanding of financial planning and with the understanding about the real value of working with financial planners who hold CFP certification.
Well, like everybody else, we have a buzzword, consumer outreach. And I think one of the neat things about consumer outreach is that there's almost nothing that stays outside of the definition of that word. We will outreach to anybody to try and convince them that they should see things that we feel are important, and we will outreach to certificants. We'll outreach to people who don't like us to see if there we have.
We never give up.
We never give up on this one. So this continues to be a central priority for the CFP Board, and we have several specific initiatives that are underway through public events and what we call earned media. Earned media, some other people would call free media, the stuff that you didn't pay for. But in reality, you've worked very hard to get attention on it and build credibility in order to have it. Our work in consumer outreach is vital to increasing the awareness of the benefits of financial planning and specifically the CFP certification. Throughout the fall of last year, over 700 CFP professionals from around the country participated in 20 groundbreaking Financial Planning Day events. And this, for the most part, is picked up by the press. There's a lot of good feeling. The only frustration is that 700 isn't 7 million.
Maybe next year.
Consumers receive free one-on-one financial planning advice with no strings attached, complemented by classroom-style workshop. These pro bono activities are an important part of building recognition in our profession, and we frequently partner with individuals, whether it be local CFP organizations or the Governor's Association or whatever. No, it was the mayors.
It was the mayors, right, exactly. And they were.
I apologize to the mayors.
Maybe next year the governors will now get on board.
Well, we should always be aspirational. But I think that helps with this outreach significantly.
But we also partnership with a number of membership organizations. We partnership with AARP in the past. We partnership with the Financial Planning Association. And other people that have similar thoughts to what we're trying to achieve as far as public information about financial planning.
That's a good point.
And we're always looking for new ones. Our work in the recent weeks has included financial planning clinics with the Jumpstart annual meetings, in addition to what Alan said about the AARP, collaboration with on publications with the Department of Labor. We'll give anybody advice if it furthers the recognition of the CFP mark as serving the public.
Whether they ask for it or not.
Right. And most of them are quite willing to listen. Our consumer guide to financial self-defense was released last fall and is now available through GSA's Consumer Information Catalog. GSA is the General Services Administration of the federal government, and I don't know whether you've gone to them for publications, but my guess is that they are one of the largest publishers in the world, and most of the stuff is readily available. There's an interesting research source to use. You can also purchase quantities of the new publication from the CFP Board directly to share with your clients, potential clients, friends, relatives, anybody else that you think would be appropriate. There's an order form that's available on our website.
Let me just chime in here for a moment, if you don't mind. As CFP ambassador, I'm doing a lot more public speaking now, and I bring it, as Eleanor Blaney suggested to do, as sort of my calling card. And I was a little concerned about, who wants to give a seminar about and talk about financial self-defense, but it's very well written, and I have been just stunned at how well it's been received when I go and speak. Everybody wants one. There's never an extra copy in the room. And in fact, I had one person call me and say they gave it to a neighbor who was sort of being targeted by someone who wasn't very scrupulous, and it really helped solve that problem. So I highly encourage all of you who are listening to check this out. I think it's a great brochure for you to bring with you when you do any speaking engagements.
Well, let me just echo that thought. I've used that also with groups, and also since some of us in the room are over 55, where you start to become ARP members. ARP meetings are also a great place to have the discussion about this type of consumer outreach and guide to self-defense. It's
very wonderful that the CFP board is really stepping up and doing things like this. We really appreciate that, those of us who are out there in the trenches.
Lynn, you mentioned Eleanor Blaney, and I'd like to take an aside here. If there's anybody listening who does not recognize the name Eleanor Blaney, she is the consumer advocate for CFP Board. She does a number of things to create visibility for us in print, television, wherever the opportunities arise. You can look for her on the website, and she produced the piece that was just talked about, but there are other pieces that come out on a regular basis, and they really are quite engaging pieces.
Eleanor is a force to be reckoned with, and we're really fortunate to have someone of her caliber working with the CFP board. She really is articulate, and she really represents us beautifully.
Something we can all be proud of, I think.
Definitely.
You can also purchase quantities of any of these publications from the CFP board. To date, more than 6,000 copies of this guide have been distributed through the General Services Administration and various other outreach initiatives. Recently, we were even asked by the financial planning group in Korea if they could translate the guide into Korean and distribute it through their networks.
Oh my gosh!
We'll work with anybody. We will continue, no matter how far away they are. We will.
Can I be the one who personally delivers them? I've always wanted to go to Korea.
Get a courier here.
There we go.
We'll continue to seek out additional opportunities for distribution.
And so then Alan also, last year what Eleanor worked on was nothing short of brilliant with her 25 tips in 25 weeks. You want to tell us a little bit about that and some other things that are coming up?
Yeah, as you point out, it's really important to get out to the public, and both the public being our certificants as well as the general population needs to know more about who we are and what we do, and Eleanor's done a fantastic job in that degree. As you stated, last year we had a series of articles, 25 financial tips over 25 weeks. That was picked up by a lot of media, including the Washington Post, Newsday, even my local paper, the Dallas Morning News, picked it up. So it had wide distribution. And the key to consumer advocacy, the message is really quite clear. Financial planning is for everyone, and people should seek out a financial planner who's a CFP professional for their personal financial needs. And that's getting loud and clear. But in addition to what we did last year is last year, this year is this year, and what we can do in the future is even more important to recognition. So in the first few weeks of this year, our consumer advocacy has included stories ranging from a front page piece in the Washington Post on how people should save their payroll tax cut to an article on ARP, widely read in the national news, where Eleanor shared ways consumers can protect themselves from financial fraud. She's been quoted in a number of magazines, including Men's Health, which is not the one you normally think about as a financial journal. We've encountered and partnered with the Consumer Federation of America during America Saves Week, and with Eleanor, we've conducted radio media tours promoting savings as part of a financial plan.
And this year you've got a new campaign that's going to be released, a lifelong financial strategies campaign. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, we're doing a Your Plan for the Month. So we're going to look at individuals and come up with stories of people that have been served and have been helped by virtue of working with a competent planner.
Oh, that's great. One of the things to mention is those of you who don't know, you really want to spend some time on the CFP website, www.cfp.net. You can download all of these brochures for free if you don't want to pay for ordering them. And you can also, what I do a lot is I'll link them and forward them to clients either one by one. Sometimes I'll actually do an e-blast of something that I think is particularly pertinent. And I also piggyback them onto media opportunities that I have. And again, it's reinforcing the notion that CFPs, those of us who've gone to the trouble to become CFPs, are a community and a group, and we have a common message. And so these are very well written, and you should be very proud, and they're free, so use them.
Well, Lynn, you mentioned that you're an ambassador. Our ambassador program is just getting underway, and currently I believe there are 6 ambassadors throughout the country. It's now up to 7. Very good. That's even better. In any case, we're looking for expanding the areas that we might be including, and if people are interested in participating in that program, by all means let people know within the CFP
It's a tremendous program, and I think the goal is to have a CFP ambassador in every major metropolitan area by the end of either next year or the year after. So it's very exciting. It's an honor to serve, and it's really enjoyable, and it's a great learning experience. It's also a great way to reinforce the notion that CFPs are out there to make a difference.
But each of us should be ambassadors anyway, whether it get that title or not.
Yeah.
As a certificant, our job is both promote the fact that people need competent advice and they need to know where to get it.
Right. Being a CFP ambassador in the Bay Area is quite daunting because it's such a large geographic area, but, you know, leveraging my time by using the media, e-blasts, webinars, these things all help. So, Kevin, tell us a little bit about your thoughts on all of this.
Well, you know, the ambassador program was really a way to leverage our consumer advocate program, and I'm really pleased, Lynn, with the way that you and the other ambassadors have hit the ground running. We have 7 ambassadors as we ended 2010. We're looking to be at 25 by the end of this calendar year, wow. 2011. We've had good success, as you have, with placements in the San Francisco Chronicle, the Cleveland Plain Dealer, lots of local radio and television, and we've also begun using our ambassadors in new ways, but not just at the local level, also at the national media as well.
And a lot of online resources, too.
Absolutely.
And, you know, that's, again, it's free, and there's just so many people now that are online that it gets that magnified.
And specifically, while we're also looking for folks in major metropolitan areas, we're looking for people who may have specialty, either if it's language specialties or other markets that might be underserved. We're looking at a broad look at candidates.
That's a great idea. So I really do believe that I do speak for all of us ambassadors here, and for also hopefully a large segment of those of you who are listening in the CFP professional community when I say we are so looking forward to the launch of CFP Board's paid public awareness campaign. So with the launch coming very soon, in fact next month, what details, Kevin, can you share with us about what the campaign will include, and where will we be seeing the campaign materials?
You know, we've been very busy over the last few months really working to finalize the campaign and making arrangements to distribute the message through a number of high-profile media properties. One of the things that I think hopefully our certificant community will feel good about is that research has played a central role in developing the campaign. You know, I've shared some of this before and as we've been out on the road, but our research has led us to choose a customized target market that we're calling the mass affluent initiators. This is really a subgroup of the mass affluent, the segment of those with $100,000 to $1 million in investable assets. And we really started the process of looking at as we looked at the campaign, knowing that we could not look at reaching 300 million folks, and so we're looking initially as we launch this campaign with a target in those folks with $100,000 to $1 million of investable assets. But
if I just point out one thing, when you talk about the 100,000 to $1 million range, that's basically the media term for that market segment. However, by targeting that segment, we will reach people with significantly more dollars that will be reading the same publications as that market will.
Absolutely. That is the media demographic that we're looking at. But the demographic is only a part of it. As we look deeper and we ask consumer groups a number of questions to get at consumer mindsets or personality characteristics, we found several traits that were very predictive of whether consumers would be more likely to seek out a CFP professional after exposure to our messages. We will begin focusing on the 35 to 64-year-old segment of the mass affluent initiator group. Again, there's no age limit when you look at a magazine or a cable news show, but that's the specific target that we're looking at. This group includes about 14 million people, or 6% of the U.S. population.
That's pretty extensive.
It is, and it's also an area that we found that when we surveyed certificants and we looked at what the average amount of assets under management of new clients, it fell within that demographic.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I was going to ask you that question.
Our research verified that giving people information about CFP professionals and what they do can change perceptions significantly. The first box on the left, as you're looking at the screen, shows consumer likelihood to consider a CFP professional in the next 2 years before and after they received messages about CFP certification. There's a substantial shift from 14% to 24% saying they were likely to consider engaging a CFP professional. Then the box on the right gives us a view of how the preference changes before and after exposure to information about certification. A good proxy for preference is asking people if they feel a product or service you're offering is for people like me. And here again, there is a significant difference before and after exposure to information about certification. Before hearing about CFP certification, 32% of the folks in our target market said that a CFP certification certificate is for somebody like me. But after hearing about CFP certification, 52% felt that it was. So for the campaign, our goal is to generate this type of change in awareness among our target market.
Okay, that brings up a good question then. What messages are you actually going to be using to create that increased awareness?
You know, I was out on the road for essentially 2 years talking to certificants, and I would ask them, what do you think's most important about CFP certification? And it was interesting, there was never any consensus. Some people say it's the exam, it's the ethics, it's the education, or whatever. Actually, we tested a number of message variations and then ranked those that were most compelling to people in the target market, what they felt was most important and most compelling. And the thing that came out on top was comprehensive evaluations and a planning focus. Those were really the concepts that grabbed most people and got their attention. Ethics was a key support point. But surprisingly, and I think this was something that we didn't expect, it didn't come out on top. As we looked how to best put the top messages together, we heard from consumers that comprehensive planning, as I said, was about pulling everything all together. So many people in the profession, I hear you talk about comprehensive planning. You know what that means. But the words consumers you really use are pulling my whole financial life together. So that led us to a positioning statement that if you need your whole financial life pulled together, then a certified financial planner professional is uniquely qualified to help. Now, this statement is not a tagline. It's not something that consumers will actually see. It's really the idea that we gave the creative people at the advertising agency. We gave it to them and gave them the challenge of coming up with ideas that will communicate this idea. And so with our target market in place, we're excited about how we move forward. We're building a new micro website that all of the campaign materials will point people to. The microsite will include information about CFP certification and feature prominently our Find a CFP Professional search tool. We want people to understand that the value of pulling their whole life together how important that is, and how to connect them to CFP professionals who can help do that.
Well, I know in the Bay Area we're really excited about that. When I talked to the FPA recently in my area, everybody kind of sat up and was all excited about this notion of actually having a CFP board drive business to them, and I think what we're looking for is to see how it's actually going to work. So I think also that the message is something that many CFP professionals do try very hard to communicate with their clients, who really in this massive information age, sometimes there's just too much information, and they still somehow don't seem to understand the difference between what financial planning is versus what are other financial services. So one of our audience members has asked, where will the public awareness campaign actually take place? Will it be in mailings, newspapers, radio, TV? What do you guys have planned?
All of the above.
That's a good answer.
Actually, our decision about where to place the campaign messages have been based on the media consumption habits, again, of our target audience, that mass affluent initiator. Now, when we looked at that group's habits, we found they're heavily involved with print and online media. And what remains consistent across all channels is the types of programming and the properties and the content they choose. For example, we found that this market has true passions in home improvement and travel, which was interesting. So we've worked with our agency to help determine the most appropriate media mix allocation based on our objectives. Taking all of this into account, we're looking at online, because so many people consult online resources, national cable television, and national magazines. I'll take you through that mix further, but before I do that, I want to note that we're still in the process of finalizing our media buys. We're getting very close, but so some of the information I'm about to share with you may change, but I think you'll get to see directionally where we're headed.
Okay.
So the online and other media properties that we're looking at were subject to a multifaceted review. We looked at how well they reached our target audience, and once again, that's the mass affluent initiator. We looked at the relevance of their content and the strength of their editorial environment, their availability for sponsorships relevant to financial planning and advice, and their scale and cost. Now, while this campaign will be the largest initiative of its type that CFP Board has ever engaged in, when you look at the marketing dollars spent by the financial services industry, the funds we have are modest, but we are very conscious of that, and we take our responsibility to be wise in how we use those resources. As we've reviewed options for all of the media buys, we've worked to negotiate the best prices and secure arrangements that will provide added value. For example, many of the online properties that include advertising also have electronic newsletters and interactive tools. We've been looking at specific ways these types of vehicles can further reach our campaign, can help us distribute our campaign message. And we also know that the personal financial expertise of the CFP professional community is something that can provide value to these sites beyond the financial gains they can get from any advertising we purchase. So our public relations team has been working closely with the marketing team at CFP Board to identify new opportunities to connect the reporters and the copywriters at the online properties, the television networks, and the print publications we intend to use as part of the campaign.
Well, I think that's a really savvy approach. I know that just recently I was quoted in our close was Eleanor, and it was quoted, I think it was started on AOL, and then it migrated to USA Today, and then it migrated somewhere else, and it's been in 7 different publications within 1 week.
Yeah, it's great.
And so really, I think, we have to take into account the type of information age we're in, and it's not just the old-fashioned Reader's Digest approach to life anymore.
Absolutely.
And I love the Reader's Digest, by the way. So that makes me sad.
I'm very sad.
I'm dating myself.
Life in these United States is a great thing.
I know. I never did get any of my stories taken into that place, I tell you, but I still love them.
For talking about the specific media mix, for television, we're looking at national cable television. Cable channels not only reach people across the country, but viewers viewers also tend to be loyal to the networks they watch, something that will help us give frequency to our message. We're looking at cable networks and entertainment networks based on their ability to deliver, again, our target audience. These include the Travel Channel, HGTV, ESPN, the History Channel, along with news properties like CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC.
If there's anybody out there in the audience that doesn't know what HGTV is, the board of directors had a couple people that didn't recognize that. Kevin will clue you in on what that one is.
That's the reverse of dating yourself, right? To not know that.
Well, and as Kevin said, for some it's the equivalent of ESPN.
There we go.
We're also looking at television viewership habits among the target market, and so it's a very sophisticated media buy. And just as we did with online and television properties, we identified potential print properties by looking at their relevance to the target market. Our strategic approach with printed newspaper magazines is to align our message within contextually relevant content. We've looked at editorial calendars, and we're working hard to make sure that we have a media mix that will, again, be effective at reaching our target market.
Okay. I think that one of the things that I'm interested in finding out, and probably our listeners are as well, is what about these do-it-yourselfer money magazines? Every month it's a new profile and you should do something different. Are we worried that by targeting those types of magazines that we're reaching an audience that really doesn't find value in paying for advice?
I think that's a fair question. In fact, when I saw the initial magazine mix, Money Magazine, and every Money magazine I've seen, to your point, says 5 mutual funds you should buy now.
Yeah.
It's kind of it that way.
They change every month.
Yeah, they're never the same.
It's a fund de jour approach.
Exactly.
That was a very important part of our discussion. In the end, even though it does look like it's targeted to a do-it-yourself market, we found that all of these publications indexed very highly against our target audience, and those, again, the target audience being people who would actually consider. Integral to this view is the fact that the target audience trusts experts, prefers to work as part of a team, believes it's important to continue learning new things, and thinks that managing their finances is complex and time-consuming. The other piece is on this, Lynn, is that the readers of these magazines, the number of them that have advisor relationships is much higher than you might think. So.
I agree with you. I find it really humorous when a client will walk in and say, last month's Money Magazine said, and I was so proud to see that I have and I'm doing, and one of my clients said, I sort of read it like I read People magazine nowadays. I just read it for entertainment, but also it gives me that language that when I come in and see you, I'm up with what's going on, and I have some trends in mind, and I get the lingo better.
Well, people still read when they read Gourmet magazine, but not how many people actually cooked,
Not me. So now let's walk through a little bit more about what type of reach you actually think you can achieve through these different media properties. It's one thing to have identified them, but what do you expect to find happens?
What we are looking at is a coordinated campaign that will generate more than almost 190 million targeted impressions by the end of this year. That's a significant number of impressions, and in the end, that's not the real measure of success for the campaign.
Okay, how are you going to measure success?
Well, when we started talking about the campaign, and we were out on the road, and Alan and Chuck were out on the road with us as well when we were talking about it last fall, it was tied to the objectives of the campaign, and the objectives were to increase awareness of, preference for, and intent to use a CFP professional. It's a very clear, clean, and I think very elegant statement of the objective. Now, in the first year or two, we are focused totally on increasing awareness of. So what we're looking at is how many people are either very familiar, somewhat familiar, or just know the CFP certification name. We'll be going into the field with a baseline survey of our target market in the coming weeks, in the next 2 or 3 weeks, and that will set the baseline standard for awareness of, then we'll be looking at a variety of different, at the staff level, we'll be looking at a variety of different metrics on a monthly, weekly, and sometimes daily basis for the websites. But it's really the goal and the number we're looking at is going to be based on awareness.
Well, I'd like to give you some feedback then as CFP ambassador in the Bay Area. I think the hardest thing that has happened and the most surprising for me is how much time I have to spend and my staff has to spend educating the press about what a CFP is. I mean, I honestly thought I would call them up as CFP ambassador and they would drop everything. Oh, I know. I have visions of sugar plums dancing in my head too. And that they would be there to help promote the notion that the public needs protection and the public should be seeking out people who are qualified. And honestly, the conversation many times is more about just educating them what is a CFP. So anything that you all can do to lay the groundwork so that we can stop having to have that conversation and then getting on to the next level would be fabulous.
Well, the point I would tell you is that, and the board saw this just today as we're looking at the campaign, it really does communicate bringing your whole financial life together and the value that a CFP certificate brings to. So
why are you backing away from saying that? You said that was going to be sort of the underlying code message. Why don't you just come out and say that?
We're going to say that in a very, even maybe a more succinct way.
Okay. I'll be interested in seeing how that is. So let me see. I've got my abacus out, and if I'm counting correctly, it sounds like we've got about 24 different media properties in total that you're looking at. And you also made clear that the media buying is still underway and that these specific media outlets may or may not be in the final plan, right? All the same, we received quite a few audience questions earlier that suggested some of these publications by name, and I suspect that those individuals will actually be pretty pleased with what you've shared with us today. Another person from our audience is asking why CFP Board doesn't advertise the benefits of working with CFP professionals in the most widely read periodicals in the USA. And I know you've talked about that a little bit. So Chuck, do you want to talk a little, Kevin's talked a little bit about that. Maybe you could add a few of your own thoughts.
Why shouldn't I talk a little bit about limitations?
Okay.
First of all, but they're real. First of all, I hope everybody listening hears the energy that comes into our voice when any of us talk about this campaign. And I don't want anybody to think that the limitations, and there certainly are limitations. We have to focus. We've got a strategy. Money is one of those things that we're paying attention to. None of those are unlimited. But we all have a great deal of enthusiasm about this at the point that we are. So we don't have these unlimited resources for advertising. We knew from the outset that we would need to be strategic and focused in this campaign. There's been a lot of effort in determining, having from focus groups to go out and doing anecdotal stuff to doing surveys to help us focus this campaign. And while the publications covered here might not be the most widely read periodicals in the world, they are among those periodicals most widely read by the demographic that we want to reach. So we've pared it down and focused that. I can assure you that all of us want the value of CFP certification highlighted in all widely read periodicals, regardless of whether we're purchasing advertising in them. And we will continue the efforts on the free media to do that broadly.
Okay, that makes good sense. Another audience member is asking a similar question, but focused on smaller but no less important media outlets. And their question is, how will the campaign impact local media outlets? And so, Alan, can you help us with that?
In a similar way it is doing on a national outlet. While we're not going to be buying local media outlets, we are developing a toolkit, and a toolkit related to how the local professional can use it to extend his or her reach in their own community. The artwork for the national ads will be available for anyone that wants to place local ads in those communications.
Oh, that's good.
Publications. And it will also include collateral material that will build on the messages that we've built into the advertising campaign.
That's really great news. Chuck, I know you probably have some thoughts on this as well.
Well, obviously, we're all looking forward to having the creative elements of this campaign completed and delivered to this public audience that we've targeted. We're anxious to share them with you. The CFP Board will be holding a webinar to introduce the creative elements and share details on the final media plan in April. Keep an eye out for an announcement and plan to join us for this. And I would also say with respect to that, we always deal with the technology as a push-pull. And this might be one of those opportunities where you might want to come into the site and pull the stuff out that we've pushed to the site, because we haven't pushed it to your office in a way that you might have picked up. Not that we're not doing blasts around and all that kind of thing, but all of us have learned to delete things that are not on today's agenda to us. So if you're not seeing something, go look for it, because it's out there. And if you can't find it, then send us an email, because this is a great opportunity to take whatever we're doing and broaden it out by groups in individual cities or individuals in individual practices.
Let me just expand on that before we get into some of these other areas. We're developing the toolkit to promote what we're doing on a local basis. To grow this industry, to increase our certificate population, there's over 200 schools and universities around the country offering programs. The same media toolkits can be made available to try to promote the fact that there is educational programs out there, and people who want to become future certificates have a place to go.
I think that's great. It's one of my biggest, loves of my heart is to try to get that next generation excited. I want kids in their sandbox playing financial planner. I know I didn't. I think this sounds like a really good time to take a look at some of these great questions that you've been submitting to us. And let me start with a couple that are about public policy and advocacy. So Michael has sent us a question. He's wondering what safeguards, if any, are in place to ensure that CFP Board does not fall prey to Wall Street and insurance industry lobbyists. So let's see, Chuck, do you want to take that one for us?
We could probably spread it around a little bit.
Okay.
No, basically we're focused on the public, and there's very little you control with what other people do. You can keep on message yourself.
And our policy folks, Marilyn Morman-Gillis, who's our Managing Director of Public Policy and Communications, she works for CFP Board. She's never worked for any of the other major, insurance or Wall Street firms, so she's committed to doing the right thing for CFP Board, the public at large.
Okay, that's good to know. And then Dennis has a question that, boy, near and dear to my heart as well. Notice I'm just taking the questions that are near and dear to my heart. Sorry, guys. No, I'm kidding. What is the status of standardizing a term or the phrase financial planner so that it is the industry go-to standard and what we're known as? And gentlemen, which of you would like to field that one?
Well, clearly our practice standards have a definition of financial planning, but I'll tell you, it's a topic that is difficult to do, and it is one that we worked on as part of our legislative proposal to define financial planning. That's one of the key goals of our legislative proposal, was that financial planning become a regulated and recognized profession. And so we continue to work with the coalition on it.
But even beyond the coalition, we're working with other organizations that are also involved in areas of financial planning. The AICPA, for example, with their PFS division, and a number of other groups that also do planning to some degree or to a totally comprehensive degree. So we can come to an agreement on what the terminology should represent.
We talked about the 3 studies that came out in January, and one of them mentioned that there is confusion, which I view as a great success of the effort that we put in, that there's recognition on the regulatory basis that there's confusion and need to deal with this. Now, will they on their own deal with this question? We'll help them move in that direction.
Well, again, I think we're sort of the first generation of certified financial planners, and there's generations of work yet to do, it sounds like. Why, and Charlene asked the question, why is the board not pushing regulation that all financial service reps must be enrolled and studying toward qualification of the CFP certification to work with people, whether clients or prospects? And, that's quite an interesting question. What do you all have to say about that?
Our legislative proposal called for the establishment of a financial planner oversight board that would set baseline competency standards and impose a fiduciary duty of care like CFP certificants have voluntarily committed themselves to. One of the things that we know from our meetings with policymakers, congressmen, members of the House Financial Services Committee, is that the CFP certification would be perceived as a barrier to entry and would not be recognized from a regulatory standpoint. It was perceived as too high of a barrier. We still believe, though, that it is important that, and we will continue to work for, the recognition and regulation of financial planning so that when a member of the public sees a person calling him or herself a financial planner, they will know that they're subject to specific guidelines and they know what they're getting.
So, and you may have answered then Geraldine's question with what you just said, because she wants us to address the obligations, the question of the obligations and duties of a CFP certificate regarding the new SEC rules, which pertain to fiduciary care, quote unquote, for fee-based and non-fee-based professionals. And then there's a follow-up question from John. Will the new SEC fiduciary standard actually be strong enough to be consistent with the CFP board? And there's actually one other related question. I'm just going to ask all these questions, and then you can get it all.
Like a member of the press,
I know. So first from Moran, and I'll just watch you sort it out. And here's another one that's difficult for a lot of my colleagues who do work for wirehouses, and David wants to know, will the wirehouses be tied to the same fiduciary standards that CFPs are accustomed to? So
let me start.
Let
me start this by putting it in some context. One of the things, if we go back and start with Dodd-Frank, the SEC is supposed to come up with a standard that is at least as rigorous as the IRA standard.
Okay.
Now, if you look at that is a long way in starting to establish a base on that. We have a standard that has been in place and enforced since January 2009 out there, and is increasingly visible. So there's a context, I think, for this. The SEC also is supposed to do a standard that goes across lines. So, I think we've got a number of things that are in motion.
Things are percolating.
That are moving in the right direction.
Well, as Chuck said, it's not been formalized yet at this point as to what the standard is going to be. We don't know, however, what the standard is for certificates because it's in our code of ethics.
Right. And
they'll always be held to that standard, regardless of where they're working.
Okay, that's a very good point.
And Lynn, so a couple things are important. First of all, the SEC, the Dodd-Frank bill gave the SEC permissive authority to promulgate a fiduciary standard. In other words, they said they can do it. It doesn't say that they have to. The report that came out that Chuck reported on essentially was a staff report that recommended that they do move forward. But again, there are 5 SEC commissioners. There was essentially some dissent among those. So what I think certificants should know is that we'll continue to work advocating for a strong, principles-based, 40 Act-like fiduciary standard for anybody giving financial advice.
Boy, what a quagmire. So it really feels good to be a certified financial planner while Congress and everybody in Washington sorts this through. In the meantime, we're just going to move forward, living the life we're supposed to live.
And you do feel, as you look at this, that you are on the side of your clients and the public in the discussion. It's a comfortable place to be.
It's what we always say, that we sit on the same side of the table with them. And sort of a follow-up.
That also gets you back to question 1, which talks about Wall Street and so on.
Right.
Because we are on the side of our clients.
We are
advocates for our clients to do what's right, and we're not trying to enhance someone else's benefit.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So is there anything that can be done with this SEC recommendation that industry arbitrators are no longer required on the panel in these FINRA arbitrations?
Lynn, the short answer is no. The SEC has already approved that rule change.
Okie dokie. All right, so moving right along to things we can talk about and do something about.
Let me say something else.
Oh, sure.
I think it's interesting to watch trends in the world. And one of the trends in the world, sometimes embraced as a positive movement and sometimes less positive, is that things are opening up. And one of the ways that you open up and become more egalitarian is you start to move beyond where you are with specific knowledge in the room. And I think that's a balance. I think everybody's got to watch it. It's got to be something that we talk about. But I do think it's one of those global kinds of trends that's going on.
Yeah, well, I agree that nothing can be done about it. As already said, I think it's an unfortunate situation not having someone that understands the services and products being available to counsel with the rest of the arbitrators.
Okay, well, that makes sense. We have a great question from Barry. Barry wants to chat a little bit about his status, or maybe not yet, Barry, I'm not sure, of being a retired CFP professional, and he wonders if we've considered a way, or you've considered a way for retired CFP professionals to stay connected without having to fulfill CE requirements. His point is that it just seems a bit unfair to have to be dropped when we leave practice actively. And he's wondering if you could consider trademarking a retired CFP professional designation.
We would love to do something about this, because the idea that great CFP professionals want to stay connected with the profession is very important. At the present time, the best answer you can give to that is do the CE and renew your license. CE costs can be dropped by looking at the lower price or free CE opportunities. That's not the best answer to the thing, but I think that's the only answer you have now. We have a primary responsibility to preserve the trademark of the CFP, and a number of these things become problematic at it. If anybody's got the great idea that finds a way to keep retired CFPs in the fold, we're all for it. There is not a negative voice anywhere about that. It's the mechanics of doing it that's the problem.
Well, I hope you guys come up with a solution, because I think you just have so much knowledge, and so many people who would probably be willing to mentor that next generation. You were talking about the Capstone program and things like that. I have to think
there's a lot of opportunity out there, and you're not going to be able to do it without CE credits.
Right.
But where you get and how you obtain those credits.
Can we get the large print version at least?
As you get older, you're going to have to get.
Can I have a cute young guy read the questions to me and I can answer out loud? So I'm very excited that we have a great question from John in Baltimore, who wants to be an ambassador for Baltimore and wants to know how he can apply. And so, Kevin, yay, John.
John, I think what you should do is go to the CFP Board website, www.cfp.net, and go to the volunteer section and apply online to be considered to be an ambassador.
Yes, and I hope to see you at our next function. That would be awesome.
And given this opportunity, let me remind anybody on the call who's interested in volunteering with CFP Board that Kevin has just said it's really quite straightforward. Go to the website, go to volunteers, and fill out the form. And we would love to hear from you.
So, gentlemen, we are really, this has flown by, and we still have, unfortunately, a lot of questions we didn't get to, and as promised at the beginning of the call, those that we couldn't address live today, you will be hearing from us afterward. But we are just about out of time. So let's go around the table. Alan, can I start with you? What last thoughts would you like to share with our audience today?
Well, so many things mentioned. I agree certainly with Chuck that volunteer positions are so important to this organization that anyone at all interested should consider volunteering. But it's important to take pride in the fact that you are certified, to engage with the public, the fact that we've got this awareness campaign, and do your own part. The board will be taking care of the national advertising, but will also providing the materials that you could use to extend the advertising in your own communities. And really, that's a great opportunity to increase the public awareness of CFP certification. When people are aware that CFP certification means, it changes their perceptions, as Kevin said, of financial planning, and it really increases their likelihood to seek out a professional. All of us on the board believe the campaign will have a real impact, and it's important that each of the certificants out there do their part and help with the important initiative.
That's really helpful to hear. Chuck, how about you? What parting thoughts can you leave us with?
Well, I certainly second Ellen's comments on the public awareness campaign as an important next step for all of us. We certainly appreciate the CFP professional community support of the CFP board and the high standards of the CFP certification. It's all of you that make us. It's not us that make anything. I encourage you to get involved with the initiatives. The board hopes to involve more people, and that's why we picked up on the volunteer activity. We want to engage more stakeholders, more volunteers during 2011. From serving on task force working groups, participating in financial planning clinics, working on exam development. It doesn't matter where you're doing it, the more high-quality contributors we have to this process, the better it is, and that high quality comes from the certificates. There's good work going on at CFP Board in many ways to make a meaningful contribution. I hope those of you listening today will consider that. You'll be notified after you complete an application when opportunities arise that suit your interests and experience.
So Kevin, as our fearless leader, why don't you bat in the cleanup spot here and give us your last thoughts today?
Well, I really do want to encourage CFP board professionals to stay connected with us with our public awareness campaign coming up. We've set up a number of social media sites, so as you see here, you'll have a way to stay connected to us. I also want to remind CFP professionals to keep their search profiles in our database updated and current. The public awareness campaign materials will feature our search tools very prominently, and we've added some additional information to the search results to help consumers find a CFP practitioner suited to their needs. You can update your profile with areas of specialization, the type of client profile, and your website address, among other things. And to participate in the updated search tool, you need to indicate that you accept new clients, obviously. So if you haven't updated for a while, I'd encourage you to log in. Lynn, I would like to thank you, one, for all the work you do as one of our ambassadors, but two, for coming down from Northern California to be here with us.
Thank you. It was very wonderful to be welcomed, and I want to thank the three of you gentlemen for your time and your efforts today. This was so much material to cover. It's just kind of mind-boggling how much you do for all of us, and I appreciate that. And I also want to reach out to all of those of you who listened in today and asked great questions. I'm so sorry we couldn't get to all of them, but I want to assure you that within the next week or so, someone from the CFP board will reach out to you. And furthermore, a recording of this presentation will actually be posted to the CFP board's website for those of you who want to maybe listen again or encourage a colleague to listen in. CFP board always welcomes your comments regarding this program, your suggestions for future programs, anything that's on your mind. So just be sure to dial in webinars at cfpboard.org, and you can always link in through their website. And again, as a CFP professional who's out there just as you are, I just want to emphasize that if you don't have time, maybe you can delegate it to a staff member to be constantly looking at the CFP website. There's just so much richness of material there that will really stun you, and as we go through this public awareness campaign, there's going to be even more. So thank you again, everyone, and go out and have a great day.